Welcome to Cosmic Whispers, where cosmic mysteries come alive. Your journey beyond the stars begins now. Earth is a water world. Over 70% of our planet's surface lies submerged beneath vast, mysterious oceans. While humans have conquered continents, built cities that scrape the sky, and even ventured into space, we remain visitors, temporary, explorers in the underwater realm that dominates our planet. But what if our evolutionary path had taken a different turn? What if, instead of emerging from the primordial seas to colonize land, our ancient ancestors had remained in the ocean depths, adapting and evolving over millions of years to thrive underwater? Today, Cosmic Whispers explores this fascinating biological thought experiment, examining how human anatomy, physiology, and society might have developed had we evolved as primarily aquatic beings. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, Cosmic Whispers is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. To understand this alternative evolutionary pathway, we must first acknowledge that humans already possess subtle traits suggesting an aquatic phase in our distant past. The aquatic ape hypothesis, while controversial among anthropologists, proposes that some human characteristics, like our relative hairlessness, subcutaneous fat distribution, voluntary breath control, and the diving reflex that slows our heart rate underwater, might be remnants of a semi-aquatic period in human evolution. This hypothesis remains disputed, but it offers a starting point for our exploration. If these minor adaptations emerged from even brief periods spent in coastal environments, imagine the profound transformations that would have occurred had our ancestors fully committed to an aquatic existence. The story of this alternative evolutionary path begins approximately 6 million years ago, when our lineage diverged from that of chimpanzees. In our actual history, early hominins moved from forests to savannas, developing bipedalism and tool use. But in our speculative underwater timeline, these early ancestors instead adapted to coastal regions, gradually spending more time foraging in shallow waters. As natural selection favored individuals who could hold their breath longer, see better underwater, and swim more efficiently, these early hominins would have undergone anatomical changes. Their nostrils might have migrated upward and developed valve-like structures to prevent water ingress. Their lungs would have increased in capacity, and their circulatory systems would have evolved to optimize oxygen use during prolonged dives. The transition wouldn't have happened overnight. For millions of years, these proto-aquatic humans would have straddled two worlds, perhaps building sleeping platforms on shorelines while spending daylight hours hunting in shallow waters. But gradually, as underwater food sources proved abundant and competition on land intensified, these ancestors would have ventured into deeper waters and spent increasingly longer periods submerged. By approximately 2 million years ago, around the time Homo erectus emerged in our actual timeline, fully aquatic human ancestors might have evolved. These beings would have retained their intelligence, manual dexterity, and social complexity, but their bodies would appear markedly different from modern humans, with adaptations specifically suited for underwater survival. To understand what these underwater humans might look like and how they would function, we need to examine comparable adaptations in marine mammals like dolphins, seals, and manatees, creatures that, like our hypothetical aquatic humans, evolved from terrestrial ancestors before returning to the sea. We must also consider the unique challenges and opportunities that would arise from combining human intelligence with an aquatic lifestyle. If humans had evolved to live primarily underwater, our bodies would have undergone dramatic anatomical transformations, guided by the fundamental physical properties of aquatic environments. Water is approximately 800 times denser than air, provides substantial buoyancy, conducts heat 25 times more efficiently, and requires specialized adaptations for respiration and sensory perception. First, consider our body shape. Underwater humans would likely develop more streamlined hydrodynamic forms to reduce drag while swimming. The bipedal posture that defined our terrestrial evolution would be modified. Legs would likely shorten and partially fuse, potentially evolving into a powerful dolphin-like fluke for propulsion. Arms would remain relatively unchanged at the skeletal level, preserving the manual dexterity that enabled tool use, a crucial evolutionary advantage regardless of environment. The skin of underwater humans would differ substantially from our own. To conserve heat in water, they would develop a thick layer of insulating blubber beneath the skin, similar to that found in whales and seals. This subcutaneous fat would give their bodies a smoother, more rounded appearance. Their skin would contain significantly more specialized oil-producing glands to create a waterproof barrier, protecting against the osmotic challenges of prolonged immersion. Hair would be largely reduced across most of the body to decrease drag, though they might retain some specialized sensory hairs, analogous to a seal's whiskers, to detect water currents and nearby movements. Skin pigmentation would likely be darker on the dorsal, upper surface for protection from ultraviolet radiation and lighter on the ventral, lower surface for camouflage, a common countershading pattern observed in many aquatic species. Perhaps the most profound changes would occur in respiratory and circulatory systems. Underwater humans would need significantly larger lung capacity, potentially up to 3 times that of terrestrial humans. Their thoracic muscles would be specially adapted for rapid compression of the lungs, enabling more efficient oxygen extraction during each breath. Unlike whales or dolphins, which evolved from terrestrial ancestors over 50 million years, our 6-million-year evolutionary window wouldn't likely be sufficient to develop fully aquatic breathing. Instead, underwater humans would remain air breathers, but with remarkable adaptations. Their circulatory systems would feature extensive oxygen-storing myoglobin in muscles and enhanced blood volume. Their diaphragms would evolve exceptional flexibility for lung compression at depth, preventing the collapse that would occur in modern human lungs. The human diving reflex, which already slows our heart rate and redistributes blood flow when our faces contact cold water, would be dramatically enhanced. Blood would be shunted away from extremities during dives, and specialized networks of blood vessels called retia mirabilia would develop to maintain warm temperatures in the brain and vital organs while allowing extremities to cool, conserving energy. Facial anatomy would transform substantially. Nostrils would become closable slits positioned higher on the face, potentially developing into a blowhole-like structure at the top of the head. Eyes would enlarge and develop nictitating membranes, transparent inner eyelids for underwater. Vision protection. Specialized tear ducts would produce lubricating fluids resistant to saltwater dilution. The human ear, already one of our most distinctive features compared to other primates, would undergo further modifications. External ear structures would reduce significantly, becoming little more than subtle ridges. Inner ear structures would develop enhanced sensitivity to underwater sound vibrations, and elaborate sinuses would evolve to assist with pressure equalization. During deep dives, these anatomical changes would create beings recognizably descended from humans, but specialized for aquatic existence. Creatures evolved not just to survive, but to thrive in underwater environments that make up the vast majority of our planet's habitable space. Beyond visible anatomical transformations, underwater humans would develop profound physiological adaptations governing metabolism, respiration, and homeostasis, the internal balancing mechanisms essential for survival in an aquatic environment. Oxygen management would become paramount. While terrestrial humans maintain relatively consistent oxygen access through regular breathing, underwater humans would evolve to function efficiently during prolonged breath-holding dives. Their blood volumes would increase substantially, perhaps by 40 to 50%, with higher concentrations of red blood cells and hemoglobin for oxygen transport. Their muscles would develop extraordinary oxygen storage capacity through increased myoglobin, the oxygen-binding protein that gives marine mammals their characteristically dark meat. Their cardiovascular system would evolve sophisticated mechanisms for managing the mammalian diving reflex. When diving, blood vessels to non-essential organs and extremities would constrict dramatically, redirecting oxygen-rich blood to the brain, heart, and other vital organs. Heart rate would drop to as low as 10 beats per minute during deep dives, a bradycardia adaptation that conserves oxygen while maintaining consciousness and cognitive function. The spleen would become significantly enlarged, serving as an oxygen reservoir by storing red blood cells that could be released during dives. During each dive, the spleen would contract, injecting these additional oxygen-carrying cells into circulation, an adaptation observed in human freediving populations today, but vastly enhanced in our hypothetical underwater humans. Metabolic adaptations would be equally profound. Underwater humans would likely develop a specialized blubber layer, not just for insulation, but as an energy reserve, with the ability to metabolize fats more efficiently than terrestrial humans. Their basal metabolic rate might decrease during dives through a form of controlled hypermetabolism, a slowing of non-essential physiological processes to conserve oxygen and energy. Thermoregulation would present significant challenges, as water conducts heat away from the body far more efficiently than air. In addition to insulating blubber, underwater humans would evolve an elaborate countercurrent heat exchange system in their extremities, networks of blood vessels arranged so that warm arterial blood flowing outward would transfer heat to cold, venous blood returning from the hands and feet, conserving core body temperature. Kidney function would adapt to manage the salt and water balance challenges of a marine environment. Drinking seawater is lethal for modern humans, but underwater humans would evolve specialized kidneys capable of producing highly concentrated urine to excrete excess salt, similar to adaptations seen in marine mammals and seabirds. Their kidneys would enlarge and develop enhanced filtration capabilities, possibly with specialized hormonal regulation to alter function during prolonged dives. Vision would transform dramatically. Underwater humans would develop spherical lenses like those found in fish, enabling better focus in water, where light refracts differently than in air. Their retinas would contain higher concentrations of rod cells for enhanced low-light vision, crucial for hunting and navigating in the dimly lit depths. They might even develop a tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer that gives cats and many marine predators their eyeshine and enhances light capture in dark environments. Their auditory physiology would undergo revolutionary changes. Inner ear structures would evolve to detect sound waves traveling through water rather than air. The bones of the middle ear would modify to better transmit waterborne vibrations. Most remarkably, they would develop specialized fat pads in the lower jaw and skull that would serve as acoustic lenses, channeling sound waves toward the inner ear, a system similar to what whales and dolphins use for underwater hearing. These physiological adaptations would work in concert to create human beings perfectly suited to underwater life, capable of diving to substantial depths, remaining submerged for extended periods, and thriving in an environment that would quickly kill their terrestrial cousins. For underwater humans, the sensory world would function according to entirely different rules than those experienced by terrestrial humans. Each sense would require recalibration to function effectively in an aquatic environment, with some senses diminishing in importance while others became enhanced or even entirely novel. Vision, our primary sense on land, would undergo fundamental alterations underwater. Light behaves differently in water, attenuating rapidly with depth and shifting toward the blue-green spectrum as red wavelengths are quickly absorbed. Underwater humans would likely develop larger eyes with pupils capable of extreme dilation to gather available light. Their color perception would shift toward the blue-green spectrum, potentially sacrificing some red sensitivity for enhanced perception of blues, greens, and ultraviolet wavelengths that penetrate water more effectively. At greater depths where sunlight fails to penetrate, underwater humans might evolve a form of biological light production, bioluminescence, particularly around the face and hands. This adaptation, seen in numerous deep-sea creatures, would allow them to illuminate their immediate surroundings and potentially serve as a communication mechanism in the darkness. Hearing would transform even more dramatically. Sound travels nearly 5 times faster through water than air and in more complex patterns. Underwater humans would lose the ability to locate sounds using the time difference between when sound reaches each ear, a principal mechanism in terrestrial hearing, and, instead, develop specialized fatty channels in their jawbones and skull to detect sound directionality. Similar to those found in dolphins and whales, their vocalization abilities would adjust accordingly. The human larynx would modify to produce sounds that travel efficiently through water rather than air. They might develop specialized, fat-filled, resonating chambers in the skull and specialized air sacs capable of producing powerful, directional underwater sounds. Their auditory cortex would evolve to process these aquatic soundscapes, giving underwater humans an auditory world as rich and informative as our visual one. The chemical senses, taste and smell, would undergo perhaps the most profound transformation. Traditional airborne olfaction would become largely obsolete, but in its place, underwater humans would develop an enhanced chemical detection system more akin to a fish's ability to detect dissolved substances. Specialized sensory cells distributed across the face, particularly around the mouth and what would have been the nose, would detect minute concentrations of chemicals in the water, allowing underwater humans to smell prey, predators, and conspecifics from considerable distances. Most fascinating would be the development of entirely new sensory modalities absent in terrestrial humans. Chief among these would be electroreception, the ability to detect weak electrical fields generated by living organisms. Specialized ampullary organs, similar to those found in sharks, would develop, particularly concentrated around the face and hands, allowing underwater humans to locate prey hidden in sediment or detect the electrical signals of other underwater humans even in perfect darkness or murky waters. They might also develop magnetoreception, the ability to sense Earth's magnetic field, facilitating long-distance navigation across featureless ocean environments. This sense, present in sea turtles, some fish species, and certain marine mammals, would provide underwater humans with an innate compass, crucial for navigating the vast, landmark-free expanses of open ocean. Pressure sensitivity would become highly developed, with specialized mechanoreceptors detecting subtle changes in water pressure that might indicate approaching objects, underwater currents, or depth changes. This distant touch sense would provide awareness of the surrounding environment, extending far beyond physical contact. Perhaps most remarkably, underwater humans might develop a form of biological sonar or echolocation, similar to that used by dolphins and toothed whales. By producing clicks and processing the returning echoes, they could create detailed mental images of their surroundings, even in complete darkness, identifying objects, potential prey, and environmental features through sound alone. This dramatic, sensory recalibration would mean underwater humans would experience a perceptual reality wildly different from our own, one where sound, pressure waves, electrical fields, and dissolved chemicals created a rich sensory tapestry that would be entirely alien to terrestrial human perception. Underwater humans would face formidable environmental challenges, requiring specialized adaptations and technological innovations to overcome. The most immediate would be pressure management. For every 10 meters of depth, water pressure increases by approximately 1 atmosphere, the equivalent of Earth's entire atmospheric pressure at sea level. At 100 meters deep, underwater humans would experience 11 times the pressure found at the surface. To manage these crushing forces, their skeletal structures would necessarily adapt. Bones would become more flexible yet denser, with specialized fibrous connections at joints to prevent compression injuries. Air-filled sinuses, a potential weak point under pressure, would either reduce dramatically in size or develop specialized adaptations, allowing controlled compression and expansion. Lungs would evolve exceptional flexibility, compressing safely as external pressure increased, rather than sustaining the barotrauma that would afflict modern human divers. Oxygen availability presents another critical challenge. Even with enhanced breath-holding capabilities, underwater humans would need regular access to atmospheric air. This requirement would substantially influence their behavioral patterns and habitat selection. They would likely favor coastal regions or areas with predictable access to the surface, potentially developing elaborate mental maps of locations where air could be reliably obtained. Over time, underwater humans might develop semi-artificial solutions to this constraint. They could cultivate specific types of aquatic plants to create underwater air pockets or develop methods to trap air bubbles under natural rocky overhangs. More advanced underwater human societies might eventually create permanent submerged air-filled habitats at various depths, serving as breathing stations and community gathering places. Temperature regulation would pose a constant challenge. Even with blubber insulation and countercurrent heat exchange systems, extended exposure to cold water would drain body heat. Underwater humans would likely develop behavioral adaptations to manage this issue, perhaps seasonal migrations following warmer currents or establishing settlements near hydrothermal vents or other natural heat sources. Food acquisition in aquatic environments would shape their hunter-gatherer strategies substantially. Underwater humans would likely specialize in hunting fish, cephalopods, and marine mammals, while gathering shellfish, seaweeds, and edible aquatic plants. Their hunting techniques would exploit their intelligence advantage over other marine predators, potentially developing sophisticated trapping methods, cooperative hunting strategies, and eventually tool-assisted fishing technologies. Reproduction and child-rearing would present unique challenges in an aquatic environment. Infants would need to develop swimming abilities and breath control rapidly, likely leading to significant physiological differences in underwater human infants compared to their terrestrial counterparts. They might be born with more advanced motor control, instinctive swimming reflexes, and enhanced diving responses. Underwater human mothers might evolve specialized mammary adaptations, allowing infants to nurse underwater without aspirating liquid. Sleep would require creative solutions, as unconsciousness in water presents obvious dangers. Underwater humans might develop unihemispheric sleep, the ability to rest half the brain while the other half remains alert, similar to dolphins and some other marine mammals. Alternatively, they might create secure sleeping platforms in shallow waters or develop the habit of light, vigilant rest while floating at the surface. Freshwater acquisition would pose a particular challenge in marine environments. Underwater, humans would need specialized kidney functions to process small amounts of seawater, or they would develop methods to collect rainwater or locate underwater freshwater springs. Advanced underwater human societies might eventually develop condensation techniques to extract fresh water from humid air at the surface. These environmental challenges would create powerful selective pressures, driving both biological adaptation and technological innovation among underwater humans, shaping their physiology, behavior, social structures, and eventual development of underwater civilization in ways dramatically different from our own terrestrial history. Intelligence evolved in terrestrial humans, partly in response to environmental challenges, predator avoidance, food acquisition, and complex social dynamics. For underwater humans, similar selective pressures would maintain and potentially enhance cognitive capabilities, though expressed through profoundly different cultural and technological pathways. The three-dimensional nature of underwater environments would fundamentally reshape underwater human cognition. Whereas terrestrial humans navigate primarily across two-dimensional landscapes, underwater humans would develop cognitive mapping abilities that functioned seamlessly in all three dimensions. Their spatial reasoning, depth perception, and mental rotation abilities would likely exceed those of terrestrial humans by substantial margins, adaptations essential for tracking prey, navigating complex underwater topography, and reliably to specific locations in the featureless open ocean. Communication would evolve along entirely different lines. In water, where visibility is often limited but sound travels efficiently, acoustic communication would dominate. Underwater humans would develop sophisticated vocalization capabilities that might include elements of both language and sonar. Their communication might combine semantic content, words and concepts, with acoustic properties that conveyed information about distance, direction, and environmental features. This acoustic emphasis would shape underwater human culture profoundly. Without written language, impractical underwater, oral traditions would gain even greater importance than in early terrestrial human societies. Knowledge transfer would occur through elaborate sonic performances, combining linguistic information with spatial acoustic elements impossible to reproduce in air. Underwater human historians and teachers would develop exceptional memory capabilities and specialized vocal techniques for knowledge preservation and transmission. Social structures would likely organize differently than terrestrial human societies. The three-dimensional environment and acoustic-centered communication would facilitate different group dynamics. Underwater human communities might develop more fluid, dynamic structures rather than the relatively fixed, location-bound settlements that characterized early terrestrial human societies. Their communities might resemble pods or schools, maintaining cohesion through vocalizations and synchronized swimming patterns rather than physical infrastructure. Tool use would follow different evolutionary trajectories. The abundance of buoyant materials like wood would be less accessible in marine environments, while stone, which sinks, would be more readily available on the seafloor. Underwater humans might develop stone tools similar to early terrestrial human technologies, but with important adaptations for underwater use, perhaps developing tools with hydrodynamic properties that could be effectively wielded against water. Resistance. Advanced underwater human societies might eventually discover methods for working with marine materials, curing certain types of seaweed into tough, flexible materials, harvesting and shaping corals, or developing techniques to work with bones from marine mammals. However, one critical technology would likely remain elusive. Fire, which revolutionized terrestrial human development, would be impossible underwater, preventing cooking, metallurgy, and numerous other transformative technologies that shaped our history. Instead, underwater humans might develop alternative technological pathways. They might become masters of pressure differentials, creating suction-based devices for manipulating objects, or even rudimentary hydraulic technologies. They might develop sophisticated biological knowledge, cultivating specific marine organisms for their properties, luminescent bacteria for light, particular plant species for oxygen production, or specialized invertebrates for construction materials. Art and spiritual expression would manifest differently. Without permanent surfaces for painting or carving, underwater human artistic expression might focus on performance, elaborate movement sequences, sound compositions, or temporary installations using arranged natural materials. Spiritual beliefs might center on ocean currents, pressure changes, or the vertical distinction between lightless depths and the sunlit surface world, creating cosmic topographies entirely different from the heavens and earth dichotomy common in terrestrial human religions. Despite these profound differences, underwater humans would likely retain core elements of what makes humanity distinctive: curiosity, symbolic thinking, tool innovation, and complex social bonds. Their intelligence would simply express itself through adaptations specifically suited to the challenges and opportunities of underwater existence, creating a parallel branch of human potential evolved for Earth's most expansive habitat. The evolutionary history of underwater humans would inevitably involve complex interactions with the terrestrial world and its inhabitants. Unlike fully aquatic mammals like cetaceans that completely abandoned land, underwater humans would likely maintain some connection to terrestrial environments, creating a fascinating boundary where underwater and land-dwelling branches of humanity might interact. Coastal regions would become critical interface zones. Underwater humans would emerge occasionally onto beaches and shorelines, particularly for specific purposes like childbirth, certain social gatherings, or accessing resources unavailable underwater. These temporary excursions would be physiologically taxing. Their bodies optimized for pressure, buoyancy, and heat exchange in water would function less efficiently in air. Their modified limbs would make terrestrial movement awkward and effortful. Conversely, these same coastal interfaces would be where terrestrial humans, evolving along the path that actually occurred in our timeline, would venture into shallow waters for fishing and shellfish gathering. Eventually, these two branches of humanity would encounter each other, creating one of the most fascinating speculative scenarios in our alternative evolutionary history. How might these encounters unfold? Initially, each group would likely view the other with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and perhaps recognition of shared ancestry. Communication would prove challenging. Underwater humans using primarily acoustic signals optimized for water transmission, and terrestrial humans using vocal communication designed for air. Yet both would possess the neural structures for complex language and symbolic thinking, potentially enabling the eventual development of a simplified pigeon communication system where the groups overlapped. Trade might eventually develop across this aquatic boundary. Underwater humans could provide terrestrial communities with resources from deeper waters, certain types of fish, unusual shells or pearls, perhaps even salvage from shipwrecks in later historical periods. Terrestrial humans might offer plant-based materials, processed items, and eventually metal tools or objects, technologies inaccessible to underwater human civilizations due to their inability to use fire underwater. The historical trajectory of human civilization would unfold very differently in this dual evolution scenario. Terrestrial humans would still develop agriculture, animal domestication, and eventually industrial technologies, as in our actual timeline. However, underwater humans would develop alternative paths to civilization, perhaps cultivating specific species of fast-growing algae or coral, creating managed ecosystems that concentrated desired fish species, or developing complex harvesting strategies for reliable food production without conventional agriculture. Global exploration and trade networks would emerge differently. Underwater humans would likely discover and map ocean currents, underwater mountain ranges, and deep-sea features long before terrestrial humans developed the technologies for such exploration. They might serve as guides for early terrestrial human sea voyages, or alternatively, they might remain mysterious figures in terrestrial maritime folklore, half-glimpsed beings appearing alongside ships before disappearing beneath the waves. The advent of modern technology would profoundly alter this relationship. Terrestrial human development of submarines, underwater breathing apparatus, and advanced materials would gradually eliminate the exclusive domain that underwater humans had maintained in the ocean depths. This technological incursion might create conflict or perhaps new opportunities for collaboration and cultural exchange. By our modern era, underwater and terrestrial human societies would likely exist in complex interdependence, each possessing knowledge and adaptations the other lacked. Environmental challenges like ocean acidification, plastic pollution, and climate change would affect underwater human communities first and most severely, potentially driving new forms of environmental activism and cross-species cooperation to protect the shared planetary ocean. This speculative evolutionary scenario reminds us that human development was not predetermined. Small shifts in selective pressures or environmental conditions might have sent our ancestors down dramatically different evolutionary pathways. The intelligence, adaptability, and technological innovation that define humanity might have expressed themselves in forms we would barely recognize, adapted for pressure instead of gravity, for currents instead of winds, for a blue infinity instead of terrestrial horizons. Our actual evolutionary history as land-dwelling primates has shaped every aspect of our physiology, psychology, and society. But in contemplating this alternative path, humans evolved for underwater life, we gain perspective on just how thoroughly our environment shapes us, and perhaps appreciate more deeply the remarkable planetary ocean that covers most of our world, still largely unexplored and holding secrets we have only begun to discover.